All right, if anybody wants to follow
Massachusetts homeowners, if you have a power meter like this on the side of your house,
on
you
YouTube.
can get paid to go solar.
All right, if anybody wants to follow. If anybody wants to follow on YouTube, here's the link. All right, how many folks? Got 13. Yeah, we're 2 minutes into the course. All right, so let's get started. Just rewinding and just reviewing where we are, where we've been, and where we might be going, so that we give other folks time to join. All right, so let's see. This is we're coming up to the end of the third week of the this Web Dev Summer 1 course. The first week we focused mostly on introducing the course, doing some really simple technology introduction to web development, the client-server architecture, also some HTML, CSS, and how to build content, static content using HTML and CSS. No JavaScript, no dynamic content. So the first week was mostly creating a prototype of a simple website that is going to provide us with an application later on at some point as we continue progressing. We'll be building an application that that represents or implements a online learning management system. So that was the first week. The second week, we focus on learning how to make the content dynamic. There's a question on the chat that says, we just have to submit the UML diagram for P2. Yes, please provide a UML. Also, that UML diagram doesn't need to be hard-coded, meaning it might change over time, as you understand the project that you're working on a little more as you progress through the semester. So feel free to come back a little later and update that UML diagram to reflect the latest design. Right, so it should be considered a living document, and this would be your first approximation of what the UML diagram is. And it's very common that as you learn more about the domain that you're building, that UML diagram should be maintained up to date with the latest design of your application. So yes, the UML, this would be your first attempt, or the first foray into designing the product that you'll be building for the final project for this course. But yeah, so P2, just a UML diagram. All right, so yeah, the second week was JavaScript, on learning how to program the browser, on dynamically fetching data from a remote server, and then injecting that content, generating HTML DOM elements and updating the user interface. This third week that we are finishing today, we've introduced React.js as a library that allows us very easily to update the DOM using some modern frameworks, some modern ideas of component technology, single page applications, routing. So we've been building fairly simple components that represents a wrapping root component that represents our overall whiteboard application that is made up of several subcomponents that allow you to display the screens, such as the course manager, or that displays a list of courses, and a course editor. And we showed yesterday how we could navigate between the two. We showed how we can dynamically iterate over an array of objects and then render the courses dynamically. So we're going to continue working on that today. You should use this as the starting code for the assignment that is due on Monday. That went out last Monday. We've been working on it together, and then perhaps during the week, the end of the week, or over the weekend, you'll complete it using some of the code that I'm providing as an example. Okay, so let's continue. Let's before we go on, any questions before we get started? All right, excellent. So let's take a look at what we've implemented so far. So here's the a React project that we created early this week. I
cannot
Is there a
see the
question?
screen if you're sharing.
Yes, let me share my screen. Thank you. There we go. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so this was a React project that we created earlier this week. And we saw that we can override the boilerplate code that is given to us. It used to be that we had some content in this app component. We overrode that by creating our own root component called whiteboard, and that includes our application. So. We also demonstrated that we can install our own CSS libraries. In this particular case, we installed Bootstrap, and then we included it here in our index.css. Bootstrap min.css, that's the library that has been minified, has been compacted in such a way that it uses the least amount of space. We then in app.js, we loaded our whiteboard. Our whiteboard is declared a root level browser router. And this browser router provided some mechanisms for implementing navigation, which basically is implemented as a set of routes that allow us to show or hide different components based on the URL that is mapped on the at the top of the navigation bar of the browser. Here we're showing that we can navigate between a list of courses and a course editor when the URL changes from one to the other. So we can demonstrate. We can run that. Let's see. We can run that. Typically, the way we run it is from the terminal. We can use npm start. npm start will kick off the Node.js server that is hosting our React application, and we'll kick off in the root URL. Notice that the root URL is not displaying anything. We might decide that there might be a default landing page, right? So, for instance, we might have a home screen. So maybe we can create here a home screen. So let's create one real quick. JavaScript. And this might be home component. And depending on whether the home component is stateful or stateless, does it have to maintain state or not? It depends whether you're going to use a function or you use a class, right? Yesterday we talked about that. So here I'm going to assume that my home component doesn't need to maintain any state. So I'll implement it with a simple function. So I'll call it home component. And by default will just be an h1 saying, or maybe something a little more interesting, maybe div, then h1 home. Okay, and we can export this, export default home component. And then in the whiteboard, we can use it as a route. We can say that we can declare a brand new route that says that if the path is / then the component that we want to show is the home component. So if we refresh, There it is. So we're showing the home component. And the home component might provide hyperlinks that might allow us to navigate elsewhere. So from here, we can navigate and create links here that from router DOM that allow us to navigate maybe to the editor. So /editor, and I believe that is mapped to the course editor. Right, if we can click on the course editor, notice that it navigates to the course editor. Or we could create another hyperlink, maybe for the courses. So course list. Right, so that notice that it allows us to go one or the other. Okay. Also notice that it's embedding. It's kind of embedding underneath the home screen. It's embedding the rest of the content. If we wanted to replace the content, what's happening here is that the URL here, right, slash says that we should load the home component, and the courses tells us that we should load the course content. But what we can do is decide that these should be mutually exclusive. Right? The way we do that is that in the whiteboard, right, the route, we can say that what happens here, because why is it loading both? It's loading both because they're both matched to this slash over here. This slash over here matches this route over here. So it loads both the home component and it loads the route. Same thing with this editor. This slash matches this slash. It's a partial match. If we want to pattern match an exact match, meaning that this would be mutually exclusive, we can add the keyword exact. True, right? And most of the cases we do want to turn on exact true because we usually want these to be mutually exclusive. We don't want to show both of them. We want to show just one of them. So if we go back, notice now if I go to the root, we're in the home, and when I click on course editor, notice that we only show the course editor. See that? Or when I click on the course list, I only show the course list. All right, so now they're mutually exclusive. So exact allows us to pattern match the URL exactly what we wanted. Okay. So the home, obviously we could maybe style this a little better. Maybe this might be a div, class name. Maybe this is a list group. Right, we can wrap this around using Bootstrap, and then we can style each one of these, saying the class name for this might be that it's a list group item. Right, so that if we go back home, notice that these hyperlinks are a little more presentable, so we can navigate to the course list or maybe the course editor. Okay, and maybe you can navigate to other components that you might have built in the previous assignment. Maybe you might have built already the a login screen, a login component. And the login component might have been something like, you can import it. You can copy the content of any other component that you might have built earlier. And the simplest thing you could do is wrap it inside of a URL component, inside of a React component. H2 login, and then export it. So export to the default login component, right? And then in your home, you can provide a hyperlink to navigate to the login. Right, this might be login, and then you can create these routes at the root, saying that you have a route here, route that maps the path login to an exact match that maps to the following component, the login component. See that? Once you've done that, then now you can click on login and navigate to the login screen, right? And of course you can create many other links here that might be relevant to other things that you might have built in previous assignments. And you can create other hyperlinks to the registration, to the profile, right? Linked to different URLs here, right? Mapped to different routes. And you would create the additional routes. So I'm going to put here to do port over registration, profile, components. Okay. What is complaining? Oh, I guess the comments. There we go. That's how you comment. All right. Any questions on routing and navigation? Any questions there?
Wait, so is the login stuff required for the assignment?
No.
Okay, this is just for routing.
Yeah, just I was demonstrating routing, and there were several questions on Piazza asking, how is it that we port over things that we might have already implemented in the Java project that we had already worked for the first assignment or the second assignment. How do we port it over? And this is how you would do it. Eventually, all of this, even though it's running right now in its own React.js project, we're going to build this and deploy it on the Java server, right? And this is going to replace, right? It's going to replace the implementation that we already have on the Java server, right? So all the user interface stuff that you had done on the Java side, eventually, all that is going to be ported over to the React side. We're going to use the Java server as a mechanism to host our React application, right? Also, later on, in about 2 weeks, it'll also give us access to data. It'll give us endpoints so that instead of using my generic server, you'll be using your own server, right? It'll be this Java server. Will provide data. So instead of going to my URL to generic server, it'll be going to yours. That's a little ways down the line.
Okay, but for this assignment, do we have to use a server?
No, for this assignment, well, actually, yeah, you need to, because it's the only way that we're going to deploy it. And I'll show you how to deploy it.
Write the data to a server.
Oh no, the data, you'll still be using my generic server.
Okay.
For data, but you will be using your Java server for hosting this.
Okay, yeah.
For hosting the user interface, the React user interface.
Yep, understood.
Okay, with that note, actually, let's move on to looking at the course table component. Right, the course table component. Why is this not showing anything? Add course. Why is this not showing anything? Course lists. It says 6. There are 6. Why are you not showing anything? Course table component. Course. Here we go. Yeah. Okay. Course table component. Where did my courses go? What? Oh, it's in the course list, right? The course list. Right, the course list is the parent to both of them. So where's our course list? It's in the container. Here's our course list. There we go. And state course list container, set layout, delete course, add course, Course lists. Okay, it shows that it's 6, but where are my courses? Where are my courses? So it's adding them, but it's not rendering them. Why are you not rendering? Let me check something. Here's the whiteboard. Here's my routing. Is it because of my routing? Course list container. Course list container. Oh, because there was a match? Because there's a layout match? Oh, right. Okay. Okay. So it needs to know in the match whether it was one layout or the other. Got it. Okay. Right. Right. So it needs to know if this is table. Yeah, there we are. Okay. Here's where we left off last time. So I'm gonna for now, I'm going to hard code that as just table here. This will be just table. Okay, I want to focus today on now right now this array, right? This array of courses is static, right? Well, not static. I mean, we can add more courses, obviously, and we can delete. Yeah, so it's not static, but when I refresh, right, any changes that I've done so far are gone, right? They've disappeared. So we need to learn how is that we could make this more permanent, right? So that even if I refresh, right, I have a more permanent solution that where I can fetch the content that I want to display here. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to follow the same mechanism, the same strategy that we did in previous assignments, right? We're going to hook this up with a remote server, right? And it just so happens that I have a server that has some data there. It's the generic server that we've been using so far, right? In the previous assignments, you might have added users, removed users, updated users. Well, we're going to be using the same technique, but we'll learn how to do it from React. Right? Last time when we played around with remote server data, we used jQuery, and from jQuery we fetch data, we post it, we get, put, delete. So now we're going to learn how to do it, but from React. Okay. Right. So in the generic server that you might have been using in my Genunzi, I have a Genunzi courses. Right. So API Genunzi courses. I believe I do. Let's see. It's taking a while. Is my server up and running? Modules? Maybe my server is not running. Okay, I have modules. Do I have courses? Yes, I have courses. And notice that I have some courses have some titles, some useless titles, whatever. Some unique identifiers. All right, here's a meaningful one, right? There's a title. And so what we'd like to be able to do is see if we could integrate our React application with a remote server so that we can post, get, delete, put, and update the data. Okay. All right. So how do we do that? Well, here here's the course list, right? And the course list container currently is providing this hard-coded array in the state. See that? What we'd like to be able to do is update this state, right? So that it's instead of hard coding it here, instead it should go fetch this information over from the server, right? And then update the state, right? Because remember, the only time that components re-render, right, is by modifying the state, right? So let's do that. Where could we do that, right? Well, there's two places that we could do that, right? We could do it in the constructor, right? We haven't looked at the constructor just yet. But just like this being a class, of course, it has a very special function called the constructor. that would allow us to initialize this component. Another place to put it is what it's called a function called component did mount. Okay, so component did mount is another function alongside with render, right? So the render function, component did mount, right? All those functions are inherited from the React component. Right? Remember, we're extending the React component class, and it defines several functions, including the render function. The render function is the only required function that you need to override, where you display how you want to be rendered, what do you want to display. But component did mount is another function that is called a lifecycle function. It's a function that it's called by the library when you are ready to be rendered, right? When everything is all said and done, and says, okay, do you want to update anything, right, before you are now rendered on the screen? So this gives you a chance to initialize the component. Yes. So let's do that. Let's declare a function. It's called component did mount. There it is. Notice my IDE already knows some of these functions. There we have component did mount, component did update, component will unmount, right? Component did catch an error. Should component update? So let's talk about component did mount. So component did mount will be invoked by the underlying library when to give you a chance to initialize the component, fetch data, things like that. So let's do that. Let's use it exactly for that. We're going to go fetch some data, right? So where do we want to go? We want to go maybe to this URL. So let's copy that, and we're going to do a fetch. And I'm going to paste that URL in there, right there. Okay, if you remember the way fetch works, right, is that this is an asynchronous call. Right? What JavaScript is going to do is going to ask the browser, right, because JavaScript doesn't have multiple threads, right? Instead, but the browser does. The browser can initialize all such a number of threads, right, that are downloading all sorts of artifacts from the web. Right, it's downloading CSS, downloading images, movies, all sorts of things to build the page. Right, so fetch asks the browser to use one of its threads to go fetch the data from this URL. The JavaScript is not going to wait, right, for this to complete. Instead, it's going to be notified by the browser when the data has come back. And the way it notifies us is by, we register a callback function. Here's a callback function. And the browser will respond and saying, hey, here is the response. It will call our function. Okay, so here's a function. If maybe we could use the old syntax, right? Here's the response, right? And then in that response, if you remember, the response only contained metadata. Right, saying that whether the response was okay, was 200, any extra meta information such as any headers, right, cookies, things like that. So we're not really interested in that, right? Instead, what we want to do is that we know that in the body, we're expecting that in the body, right, this data that's coming back from the server, right, we're expecting that data to be embedded inside of the body of the response, right? So we need to parse it using the JSON function, and that's what we're going to return. Right now, this parsing of the body in converting into JSON is also an asynchronous operation, right? Because the data is coming as a stream, right? So it needs to be buffered, right? It needs to be concatenated. It needs to be converted to a string, and then it needs to be parsed into a JSON object. So it's also an asynchronous operation. So this .json this .json is also we need to register another callback, right, where we're going to receive the actual array of courses. Okay, and then we can just print out in the console log the actual array of courses. Okay, notice that I'm mixing and matching, the old syntax, the old JavaScript syntax. I'm matching it with the with the new ES6 syntax. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Go to this React. Let's look at the inspect. See if in the console we get any useful information. Oh, look at that, array 4. Right, so if you could look at that, right, those are actually those are the courses. There we are, right? Whatever, right? Januzzi, whatever, CS 4550. These are the same courses over here. See that? Right? So we could, once we have the courses, what we could do is we can use this to update the state, right, of the component by using, you know, this dot set state, right? We can say set state, and we want to what we want to do is override the courses array with my courses that's coming from the server. And say courses colon actual array of courses. Okay, so let's go back here. Oops, cannot read set state of undefined. That's it. All right. So so this here, right, this, notice because I'm using the old function syntax, ES5, this actually might be bound to the function and not the class itself, right? The object itself, right? So I'm going to replace this and put it using the new syntax. Right? Remember that one of the new features in ES6 is that the keyword this means what we think it means, not what JavaScript intends for this, right? So I'm going to replace this. I'm going to remove this function and put an arrow here, right? And now it works, right? So notice that indeed we have the CS 4550, whatever, no title and whatever, and it does match the data that we're getting from our server, right? Here's whatever. This one has no title, and this has the titles whatever, and then CS 4550. So there we go. There we have it, right? So we have fetched data from a remote server. This has had no owners, no updated, but indeed we were able to fetch this data from a server. Let's clean up our code a little bit. What we're going to do here is that, and notice that we have this dot then, and then we have again this dot then again. See this? So that's very hard to read, and so we can clean that up a little bit. First of all, we don't need this parentheses, right? So that's a little bit easier to read. Also, if we rewrite this as a return, okay, then that means that this dot then, what's coming back from this dot then is whatever this returns. And what does it return? It's the promise that we can use to wrap this here, right? So that means that we can move this. We can move this down here actually. Yeah. All right, so now at least they're not nested inside of each other, so that which makes it hard to read. Okay. Also, notice that this return is returning this one thing, and because it's returning one single thing, we don't really need this return, right? We can remove the curly bracket, remove the curly bracket, and remove the return. Right. So this is an implicit return. Right. It is returning, but it's because it's the only thing in the function, right? So now we can just remove this new line. It could be just one single line, right? So that's much easier to read. Same. I think that's it. Anything else? I guess we can move this parentheses up here. Okay, now it looks like if it's one line after another, right? We handle the response, and then we set the state, right? So certainly this is much easier to read than all this nesting that goes around. Everybody okay? The other, remember, just like we did in jQuery, this component or this container is playing the role of the controller, right? Remember in jQuery, we were following model view controller, the design pattern where we had the view with the HTML and whatnot. We had the controller that was handling all the events, was fetching all the data, was gaining the data, but the actual fetching of the data was being implemented by a service, right? So the controller wasn't actually fetching the data. It was delegating that work to a service class, right? So we should do the same thing here. Right now, we have this container, which is somewhat playing the role of a controller, right? It's providing state, It's handling the events for deleting, for adding courses, right? So it's doing a lot of the work, right? But it should, and it's also fetching data. So let's break up this a little bit, right? And have the service, a dedicated service, handle all the communication with a remote server. So let's do that in a separate directory. All right, let's create a directory where we have all our services, and so there should be one service per data type that we are manipulating. So in our case, right now we have courses, right? And so we would like, so that's one data type, and so that's one data model, right? We like to be able to create courses, update courses, delete courses, all the CRUD operations, right? Should be encapsulated in a dedicated service file, right? So let's create here a JavaScript, and we'll call it the course service. Okay, so in here we might want functions such as create course, that might take as argument a course object, right, and does something. One that deletes course, right? Maybe it receives maybe some course ID of what we want to remove. Maybe we have also find a course by ID. So if you give me the ID of the course, I'm gonna go, I can fetch it for you. Okay, and maybe also find all courses, right? Again, this one's the one that we might want. Yes, so this find courses, right, might be this implementation right here. Okay, so notice that there's these 3 lines of code, right, have distinct roles, right? It has distinct separate roles. These first 2 lines over here are specific to fetching the data from a remote server and maybe converting it over into JSON, right? Whereas this second half over here is explicitly for updating the user interface, right? Providing the data for re-rendering this data. See that? So these are 2 separate concerns, right? That right now they are intermixed into 3 or 4 different lines of code, right? So we're going to grab the part that is responsible for communicating with the remote server. We're going to copy that. We're going to bring it over to the find all courses. We're going to paste it in there. Okay, and so this find all courses is going to return whatever that promise is. And once we have that, right, we can then maybe use the service to do this part, right? And then locally, we can use this to provide that data for the user interface to render. Okay. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we, what we'd like to be able to do here is export all these folks, okay? We can export these all individually, right? We can export one big object that contains all of these functions, right? And then from the container, we can import the ones we need, right? In our case, I probably will need at least the ones, at least this one, find all courses. So let's do that. We can export individually, or we can export one single object. So let's do export, and we'll export default, and we'll export an object. We'll export one object, and the object is going to contain a keyword name value pairs, right? So it'll be the key create course, and then the value will be the function. Same thing with delete. All right, so we're exporting an object, a map, so that will give us access to every single object in here. Okay, once we import course from services core service. Okay, once we import it, we can now use each one of those functions. We can replace this. And say that we're using the course service, find all courses. See that? And find all courses is going to return a promise, which we are using to then update the state. Make sense? Let's see if this still works. Let's refresh. Okay, this still works. Everybody good? Everybody still with me? Any questions there? Anything on the chat? There's a couple of questions on the chat. Let's see. Maybe, okay. We just have to submit an act. Maybe because it's neither grid nor okay, thank you. It's promises all the way down. Yep, yep. It's promises, actually, the syntax .then, and those returns that we saw earlier were, I mean, they were designed to be able to interact with asynchronous operations, right? That we could not guarantee the particular order in which things were happening, right? Because we could when we're talking to something that is remote and we're talking to them asynchronously, it means that we can't guarantee. And if we send 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different invocations to a remote server, we can't guarantee the sequence of operation. It could be that we send them in 5, in a particular order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But we can't guarantee that they will come back in the same order in which we sent the requests, right? So we need a mechanism to synchronize, right? And say, okay, well, I want to be able to consume this content in a specific order, right? So this syntax allows us to do that, right? Where we send a request, or, we do something asynchronous, but not until we have an acknowledgement that has completed. Once we have an acknowledgement, we can then go on to the next one and go on to the next asynchronous invocation, right? We used to use a syntax called a callback syntax, where what we would do is that we would pass a function for a callback, and what you ended up doing in that syntax, you had all these nested callbacks, right? And the code became very, very hard to read. It was all skewed, right? So what this did is that it kind of reversed the syntax in that it's allowing us, right, to write it kind of like from top to bottom, right? Like the syntax that we have here. Well, we used to have then, right? Which almost makes it look like it's sequential, right? That things are happening in that order, right? Without this ugly nesting. Anyway, that was the intent of this API. All right, so let's continue. Let's clean up a couple more things. So here, notice that in our find all courses, notice that here we are only returning this piece. We're only returning whatever that fetch is returning, right? So we don't really need this return over here. We don't really need it. So again, we can use, so this return is an explicit return, right? The syntax says it, that we are returning this. But we can use what is called an implicit return that says that the function, if we have one single line of code, right, the function by default will return whatever that line of code implements, executes, right? So this is an implicit return. It's returning whatever the fetch is returning, right? So this says, this function is evaluating to whatever this evaluates, okay? So that's one of the cleanup. The other thing that we're going to clean up is that in ES6, whenever you have an object, right, a JSON object like this, where the keywords and the values, right, if they are the same, right, keyword and the value are the same, then there is a shortcut, right? There's a shortcut, right? You don't need to include both of them, right? You can just use the value. The value will be treated as also as a keyword, as a key to the map, right? So we can clean this up a little bit so that it's even more compact to read. There we go. Okay. So this is not an array, right? Notice it is an object, and objects have key value pairs, right? Have the same works. Refresh. Oops. There we go. Refresh. All right, still working. Also needed that it's notice that it's kind of flickering. You could see the data that was already there. So we can fix that, right, by we can fix that by just removing this this dummy data here. We don't need it anymore, right? We can just use courses as an empty array. Okay, we might need it maybe at the beginning, just for us to prototype it and see that it's working, right? But once we are confident that it's working, then we can remove it. Okay. All right, let's go on. So yeah, we have this list of courses that is coming from a server, and notice that we still have this this OK and delete. Notice if we click on delete, looks like it's deleting, but not really, right? But what's happening is that we are updating the local copy, the local cache of the array that is a copy of what the array is in the remote server. Right? Notice that if I refresh, the information is still there, right? It hasn't gone anywhere. Same thing, right? If I update something and I say OK, I've only updated the local copy of the array. Right? The remote server, if I refresh, notice that it's still blank, right? So how can we fix this? Right? So how can we fix this? Also, notice that if I add, right, it's adding. It looks like it's adding, but when I refresh, right, it's gone because again, we haven't told the server that any of this exists. All right, so let's fix this. How about creating new courses? How do we do that? Right, so how do we create courses? So the way we create courses is we have this add course. See this? So this add course is doing what? Well, it's creating a new course object, and then it's appending it to the old array. Okay, well, that makes total sense. But we want to make this a little more permanent, right? We want to tell the server, right, that it should create this new object, right? And then we can add it to the array. Yes. All right, so let's do that. So we learned how to do this a couple weeks ago. What we did is that we implemented the create course, right? And the implementation that we used, right, was very similar to this, right? We had a fetch. Right? And what do? Let's see. We remember that by default, this fetch is a get request, right? It's a get request. So we don't want to do a get. Remember that for creating data in an endpoint, right? We instead need to configure this to use a different method, right? To use posts. Remember that, right? Plus, we needed to embed the data that we wanted to create. We embedded inside of the body, as a JSON string, right? We needed to convert this, right, this course into a JSON, into a string representation, and also we needed to send over to the server telling it how is this data encoded, right? What is the data type for this, right? So we did that in the headers, right? We said that the content type is JSON, right? So we said that it was application / JSON. This is exactly the same thing you did last week, right? Same identical technique, the same skill set, right? But now we are using it inside a React application, right? So if you remember, when we posted this information, the data would come back to us, and it would have its unique identifier, right? With the data, whatever data we passed in, right, it would come back stored in the container, right, in the URL, in the array, the server, and then it would come back with the object that was actually inserted. Just a second. Sorry, my dog. It's not sure if he wants to go in or out. Any questions? Okay, so presumably the new object instance that we just created, the new course, is going to come back to us. We're going to parse it, right? We're going to parse it. We're going to have to return. Here's a return, right? This return is very important, right? Because we're if you don't return, it's not going to work, right? So in this add course, what we're going to do is that we're going to call in the service, course service. We have the new course, there it is. We're going to create a course. I'm going to pass this new course. There it is. Notice that we were creating this ID, this underscore ID. We don't need it anymore, right? We don't need that anymore because the server is going to create this ID for us, right? So we're going to comment that out. We're going to pass the new course. It's going to come back to us, right, with the actual, right, new course that has been now stored in the remote database. And what is that we want to do with it? We want to copy it over into the array, so that into our local array, so that locally we have a copy or an updated version of what it's in the remote server, right? So that, right, we have a local copy that we fetched initially, and we're going to add a new course. And we're also going to, once we get confirmation that it has been added, right, and it comes back saying, hey, yes, I did insert this object into a database, right? It's going to come back to us, say, yep, this new object, it has this new underscore ID, it has the underscore created and updated and all that, right? And here it is, right? We're now going to append it. We're going to append it using this state. So this dot state, set state, we're going to embed it right here. There it is, okay? Right, and here's the actual new course. We're going to append it at the end of the courses. See that? We're not going to use the new course. We're only going to use the new course to send it over to a server, right? Which has the information, the modified, blah, 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 owner, me, and so on and so forth. Everybody okay? All right, let's try it. Let's try this out. Let's see if this this blows up. Okay, we're here. Let's say add course. Okay, let's see. Let's refresh. There it is. Notice that the new title ABC is indeed has been added to the remote server. Notice that if we fetch it here, notice that new course, new title ABC is indeed has been added to the remote server, right? Yeah. So we have successfully updated the added a new item into the remote server. Yes. Any questions? All right, so let's see. We have the capability of adding new courses. Right. Notice that including the owner, the last modifier. Let's add a couple more. So we have CS 5200 add. Then we have 5610 add. Okay. 3200. 1800. All right, so we have all these courses, and if I refresh, the courses are there, right? They haven't gone anywhere. What about all this garbage that we have up here? Whatever, empty, whatever. We want to be able to remove them, right? So we have the delete, but that's not really working, right? If I refresh, we still have them there, right? So let's fix that. So for delete, what do we have for delete? Let's see. Here's our delete course. And what we're going to do here is that we're going to implement it here in the create course, right? We have delete course, find course by ID. So let's implement delete course. So delete course is going to look very, very much like this fetch here. It's going to grab it, I'm going to copy it. But instead of being the default get, right, we're going to override that. I'm going to say that the method should not be a get, should instead be delete. Okay. Also, we are going to encode at the end of the URL, right? We're going to encode the course ID, right? We're going to concatenate here, slash plus course ID, and we're going to do a delete. And also, we want to return, right? We're going to return there. Okay. All right. So let's try it out in the container. When we use this, we want to invoke that URL. Let's do that. We're going to say. We'll say course service. We're going to delete course. We're going to pass the course ID. So notice that the implementation is slightly different, right? We're going to be working with IDs, right? Because we can't work with instances because across the client and the server, we can't really pass a reference. Because they're in two different spaces, right? Mine here is running on my browser here on my machine, whereas in the remote server is running in some other server, in some other CPU, in some other RAM space, right? Here, when we were running everything in my React application, it made sense that these were references to objects, right? But in here, we're going to be working with IDs. So here we're going to pass in the course to delete the ID, pass that. It's going to come back with a results. Right, with the status information. Status is probably going to say, yeah, okay, I was able to delete one course. Very good. And after we have successfully done that, we need to update the local array, right? We're going to say, okay, well, we have successfully removed it from the remote server. We also now have to update our local cache, right? A local copy of the array. So I'm going to, and notice if I leave this here, that's not going to work, right? Because remember, this is asynchronous. That means that our local script, right? Our local JavaScript thread is not going to wait for this to be completed. You know, it's gonna send the request. It's gonna jump right after this. Okay, it's gonna execute this. We don't want to execute this until we have a response, an acknowledgement from the remote server that we have indeed removed the course, right? So we should move this right here, right? So that we don't remove our local. We don't update our local array until we have confirmation that it has been removed from the remote server. Excuse me. Also, I mentioned, right, that notice that we have the course to delete. I mean, this still could work, but as I mentioned earlier, right, we can use IDs instead, right, so that we skip the IDs. Although this would work as well. Let's try it out. Let's refresh. Let's remove this this one that has no label. Let's do a delete. Okay, let's refresh. Okay, notice that it's gone. Right, so let's remove a couple more. Notice if I refresh, it's gone. Right, we can see and inspect. Right, we can see that the communication, the network communication. Right, when we click on edit, delete, notice that indeed we're sending in the headers, you can see that the URL is going out. You can see the delete, the request is delete, right? And it comes back with an okay. It's coming back with some status information saying that, yeah, everything was okay. We were able to delete one object, okay? How long it took and everything, right? So let's refresh. So we are able to successfully delete. Excellent. Let's do some cleanup of the code. Let's go to the to delete in the service. Let's see. Let's clean something up here in the service. Well, let's see. All right. So this return, remember, this return is an explicit return, but again, because we are only doing this fetch, right, and we are only executing this basically a single line of code, we don't really need the return. So let's clean that up. Let's remove it, right? And we also need to remove the curly brackets. If you don't remove the curly bracket, it's not going to work, right? Then it's not an implicit return, okay? And let's do this here as well. We can remove this return here and remove these curly brackets. There we go. All right, so we clean that up. What else? I think that's it. In the delete over here, this seems to be good. Notice here this this course service delete course. That's only the only real thing that we're doing, right? So it's a single line of code, right? So these curly brackets are actually not necessary, right? That's the only line of code that we're doing. Over here, we do need the curly brackets because we're doing two things, right? First, we are creating this object, and then we are calling this create course. So we need both, right? Although we could here, instead of using this variable here, we can clean that up as well, right? We can use this curly bracket, right, and we can move it in here, right? So we don't really need this this local variable. So then we can remove the curly brackets, right, and make this even more compact. Maybe we broke something in text. Oh, I did create it. Yeah, no, never mind. Add another one. Oops. All right, so it is creating it. It's my server is a little slow today, so it's taking a while to go create it and then come back. Okay. Also delete. Does that delete work? Yeah, so it is removing. Refresh. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we just cleaned up the code a little bit. Any questions so far? All right. So we looked at being able to create a course, being able to delete a course, be able to retrieve all the courses. How about the fact that we want to update the course, right? So say, for instance, here I made a mistake, and the title of the course should really be CS 1234, and we say okay. Notice that we've only updated locally, right? If I refresh, right, notice that it's still not it hasn't actually updated. How can we do that? How we can fix that? Well, if you remember, the editing actually happens where? It happens inside of our row, I believe. Yes. So in the course list, as we're iterating, we are rendering several course rows. Where are the course rows? Yeah, here's the table component, and in the table component, we have the row, right? And in the row is where we're doing most of our update, right? We have the new title, right? Right, we can turn on the flag that we're editing, right? So we show the input field, we don't show the input field, and this is actually what gets it's updating, yes, locally in this input field over here, this input field, okay, right? And the way we update it is through this update course title. Well, but the changes are not being made permanent, right? So how can we fix this? Well, let's see. We have the old course that has been passed on to us. We do have the new title, right? The new title that we're updating there. So I think we have enough that we can fix that we can update this, right? So let's implement it first in the service. We go into service. Remember that in the update, do we have update? I don't think we ever implemented it. It's going to look very much like our create course, right? So I'm just going to copy this. Or actually, yeah, let's copy it. Copy, and I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to call it instead update course. So update course. For the update course, we'll probably need two things. We need the course object. We also need the course ID, right? The ID of the course that we want to update. And so we know that we're going to use the URL, right? We're going to append the URL, and so that we can encode the ID of the course that we want to update at the end of the string of the URL. The method is going to be a put, right? And we are going to stringify the new data for the course, the new title, the new owner, the new whatever, right? Any changes are going to be encoded in there. It is going to be headers, and the response is going to be probably a status information saying, yep, we were able to update it, everything's good. Right, so once we have that implemented, right, we want to export it so that others can use it outside of this namespace, so that in the row, we can import the service, right? We can import the server, we can say import. Now here we are, wait, why are you complaining about the export? What? Yeah, so let's do that. Let's import the service. So let's do import course service from, let's go up one and then down to course service. Okay. So what we're going to do in the update course title, we're going to use that. We're going to use that course service. We're going to say course service dot update the course. Okay. We need to pass the ID of the course. Where do we have that? I think we have that in the state. This.state.course.id. We have that, and we need okay. So it's going to be the new object is going to be, this.state.course. I'm going to copy over the old state, okay, but I am going to override the title to have the new title. And so that's what I'm passing, right? It's the update is too long. I'm going to put it in 2 lines of code so you can read it. So I'm passing a JSON object, right? that contains the old state for the course, but with the new title. And this is going to come back with a status saying status, saying that, whether this was successful or not. And once we have confirmation from the server that yes, we have updated the course, right? We have updated the course. We can just do our local update. We can do our local update, right? We can say, this, that state, yada, 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 update the previous course and the new title, right? Okay, so let's try it out. Let's see if this blows up. Let's refresh. So let's change this, right, to be CS 1, 2, 3, oops. CS 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Say okay. I guess we can inspect to see if that worked. We can look at the network and see if we are sending the put. Let's try it again. And so this is maybe 5. Ooh, why are we making all this over and over? Oh, I see. Update course title. Why are we, let me see. Where's our input field? Oh, I see. We're changing, we're doing an on change. This update course title. Oh, so update course title, we're updating it. Oh, okay. Probably we don't want to do that. Probably want to do it when we click on the OK button. How's that? All right, let's do that. Let me put this back the way it was. So we're going to change strategies here. We're only going to do the update, right, when we click on the OK here in this OK button, right, in the set editing false. So yeah, let me put this back the way it was. Yeah, because here what we're doing is in the update course, probably the name is of the function is misleading, right? So let me put this back the way it was. Copy that like that, and I'm going to move this out of here. There we go. Okay, like that. All right. And what we're going to do here is that in the state, in the set editing, right? The set editing is it's kind of like a save, right? Where the OK seems to be like a save, right? So if it's false, so I guess it should. I would say that this OK should have its own event handler. So let's do that. Let's have an OK, right? OK. And what it should do is should do two things. It should do the update course, right? Send over the course. And the title would be what? The title would be, well, the course should already have everything, no? Already the new title. It should already have the new title. And because it's all, we've been typing and updating it locally, so I don't have to copy anything. It already has everything I need. Already has everything. And then we really don't need to change the state because it has been changing as we were going, right? It's already, so I'm gonna just ignore this then that status, right? I'm just gonna make it a no op. Let's see. This closes with this. This closes. We don't need that. Let's see. This closes with that. I think that's it. We did, right? Because we need to change sets. Oh, okay. Change the set editing. We can call the set editing false, right? So that we can dismiss the input field. We can say this dot set editing to false. Okay, right? And then we can remove these curly brackets. Now in our OK button, where's our OK button? Our OK button, we wouldn't call this here. We would call this dot OK. See that? Notice that I removed the curly brackets. See that? we remove the curly brackets. Right, we could do this, right? We could certainly do that, but we don't need to. Right? We don't need to, right? This should work fine. Let's see if it works. Let's see if we broke something. Let's see. Can we change this? We say edit, and the network. We shouldn't be sending anything. Say okay. Let's see what we sent. The headers. Looks like we did send the title correct. We updated it. We can refresh. So it did work. It worked fine. What I did want to point out here is that this here, right? We don't really need this this parenthesis here, and the reason is that only when we're passing some arguments, right, that we need this parenthesis here to call this function, then we need to embed it in a closure. But if we don't need to pass any parameters, right, we can use this more compact syntax, right, where we just pass a reference to the function, meaning, this onClick will call this function later on. Only when we need to pass reference arguments or parameters, then we need to wrap it inside a closure, right? Well, let's see if this still works. Let's try and fix this. Let's see, edit. Change this to 7777. Say okay. Let's refresh. Okay, seems to be working. Okay. All right, awesome. All right, any questions so far? No questions. Okay. One more thing. Notice that one of the requirements was that we wanted to be able to highlight a row when we were editing it, right? So, for instance, when we say edit, right, we want to highlight it. And so the way we can do that, right, is that here in the row, this is the row that we are using. We can use a class, right? That's I believe it's called I forget what it's called. Let's go to Bootstrap. So get Bootstrap and look at the documentation and look at the tables. How to highlight rows in a table. And so if you look for the here for danger, no, maybe primary, no. Do we have rows here? Oh, no, I looked for table. I thought it was in the table. Table. There we go. All right, let's look for one of the keywords. There it is, primary. See that? We can highlight with different colors, right? And the way we do that is by using these classes. See that? So green, I believe, is success. Blue, right? This blue is primary. So let's use this color. So if we go here and we apply to the table row, we apply a table primary, we'll notice that now they're all highlighted. See that? But we don't want to highlight all of them. We only want to highlight them when we're editing. Right? So we want to programmatically calculate what class we want to apply. So how do we do that? Well, what we can do here is to convert this into an expression. We can convert this into an expression, right? And we can say, okay, this expression evaluates that string. So now this is still static, right? Still sources. Uh-oh. My server died. Okay, my server, I guess, is very slow today. All right, so we are highlighting all of them. So, but because this is an expression, you can now add some. We can add some logic. Right? We can add some logic. We can say if, right, if the remember that we have this flag here. right, that we're editing or not. And whether we're editing or not, right? If we are editing, we want to highlight it to be primary, but if we're not editing, we don't want to highlight it. So we want this to appear and disappear based on this variable, okay? So how do we do that? So what we can do is evaluate, and we can say a question mark, right? This dot state dot editing, and so we could do a tertiary conditional, right? With this, where this evaluates to true or false. If it's true, it's going to evaluate and return the first part. If it's false, it's going to evaluate and return the second part. See that? Okay. So be the empty string, meaning I don't want to apply any class. Right. So let's take a look at that. So if we click on edit, there it is. Notice that it's being highlighted, and we say okay, it unhighlights. See that? So that is a mechanism that we can use for that. Right, and you can highlight several of these, right? Make changes and then say okay and dismiss them. What else? So how about in the grid? Oh, why is the grid not working? Oh, okay. Oh, right. Because grid is using the this mechanism. So let's take a look at that next. Right. So notice that here, right? We were using the URL as a mechanism for showing or hiding tables or grids or choosing different representations, right? Different layouts, and it's not quite working, right? And the reason is that React is by design lazy. Okay, what I mean by lazy is that you know, reading and writing to the DOM, to and from the DOM, is very slow, right? And so React tries to optimize it by optimize the performance of rendering the user interface by limiting, right, or minimizing or optimizing whenever it needs to go out to the DOM, right? And so, for instance, me changing this to so I think this was stable, right? Me changing this URL grid, see that? It did change, and I believe we had logic there to decide to navigate to a different component. But as you know, as far as React is concerned, nothing has changed. The URL has changed, but the state information of the component, it hasn't changed. And since the state hasn't changed, then it doesn't need to re-render. Right? So let's fix that. Let's see. So in the course list container, what we have is the following, right? We have the course table is rendering right here, and we have the course grid, and we modify the button to set the layout to be table or grid. Okay, and the way we did it was to implement it as follows. Right, we use this.props.history.courses layout. Right, we never change the state. Now the reason we did that is that we wanted to force the navigation by using this.props history.push, and that should have modified the change and that is just the properties because remember this map here in the whiteboard, we mapped it to this layout. See that in the route? Remember that? And then we use that, right, to populate this state variable right here. See that? And that's how this works, right? That if I type here table, Notice that it renders table, or if I type grid, right, it renders the grid. So that works, right? But it doesn't seem to be working when I click on this table. See that? It doesn't change. And the reason is that it says, well, I mean, the URL changed, sure, the URL changed, but the actual state hasn't changed. Why am I going to re-render the user interface? Okay. What did change though? Not only did the URL change, but also when we do this.props.history and we change the URL, what happens, right, is that this changed, the URL changes. So this triggers and it wants to re-render the course list container again, right? But the only thing that has changed is this props, right? It's going to have a different, right? This prop is going to have a different layout value, right? Because it used to be grid, now it's table, then it's grid, and then it's table, right? That's the only thing that has changed. The properties that are being injected from above, those change, but the current state of the application hasn't changed, okay? So how do we fix that? So to fix it, we have another hook, event hook, which is called a component did update, right? The component did update, right, is a function that gets notified whenever any of the properties, right, whenever if a property changes, right, because of some outside state information has changed, and we are being notified through our properties. This is a hook saying, hey, I know you rendered already, right? You already went through your initial, rendering, but something has changed, a property has changed, which you should take a look at, right? Maybe you need to update your state. Maybe this renders your old state stale, right? You need to change it, right? And so what we're going to do is that here we're going to change. We're going to console log. Let's take a look at the previous. What it gives you is the previous properties, meaning so that you can compare them with the current properties, see if they have changed at all, right? So let's print them both. Let's print the previous property, and let's print the current property, this.props. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Let's inspect. Let's do a console and clean, and let's click on grid. All right, notice that we are being notified of some information, right, on line 60 and 24, 24. These are the ones we really care. 24 and 25 are these two lines right here. See that? And if we look at them, the previous properties, the match, the layout was table. See that? That was the previous one. But currently, the match, the parameters, the layout now is grid. See that? It changed. It used to be that it was table, right? Layout table, see that? But now the layout is grid. So something did change. We are being notified that the property has changed, right? And so it's a chance for us to say, hey, our current state is stale, right? We should change it. Right? Again, this is to force. React.js is putting a burden on us developers to notify that, hey, your state needs to be updated, right? So let's do that. What we're going to do is we're going to compare. We're going to say if indeed the previous properties, right, dot match dot params dot layout, right, if the layout, if it's not the same, if it has changed, it's not the same as the I'm going to copy the state, right? I'm going to set it. I'm going to update my layout, right? My layout has changed. It now should be the current layout. Okay. All right, let's try this out. Let's see if this blows up. Okay, so this is grid. Let's call this table, and there we go. See that? We are now able to navigate between the two by changing the URL. Notice that we're not we are forcing the URL to change, and that translates into rendering the correct layout. Okay. Did that make sense? All right. Yeah, that goes with practice, right? You need to practice a little bit on your own and see and create some of the prototypes for yourself, and so you get that working. All right. Okay, now we need to be able to deploy this on our Java application, right? So to be able to deploy this in our Java application, let's see what we have so far in our Java application. Let's see what we have. Let's open up the old Java application. Let's see. There's our Java application. There it is. Let's run it. Let's see. Let's run it. And this is going to run on port 8080. Okay, it's running on port 8080, and let's open it up. Localhost 8080. There it is, right? So this is what we have so far. So we want to replace this with our current React application, right? So the way we're going to do that is that in our React application, we're going to stop it. I'm going to stop it. Okay. And you'll notice here that one directory that is not present, right? I just want to point out that it is not currently present, is a build directory, right? What we're going to do is that we're going to do npm build, npm build. And it's not, we don't have the build. Why don't we have the build? Client React, oh, with no arguments. npm, oh, npm, maybe npm run build. There we go. Okay, so what this is going to do is that it's going to package our entire set of components, everything into one set of small files, right? There it is. So it creates the build directory. There it is. And this build directory is missing a whole bunch of things. Wait, is it still running? Wait, what? Oh, there it is. Okay, it was still going. Okay, so notice that it has an index page, right? It has all our JavaScript, right? Has been mushed into this file in a single line, right? All those components we just built, right? Notice that it has been built all onto this unreadable mumbo jumbo that we can't tell what it says, right? Also including here this JavaScript, right? Again, some mumbo jumbo that we can't make sense out of it. What it's done is that it has compressed all our source code into this set of JavaScript files, right? Plus our CSS has also been compacted into these CSS files, right? And so now what we're going to do is that we're going to grab this whole thing, right? We're going to copy this whole thing, right? And we're going to head over to our Java application, right? So in our Java application, in our source, in our web app, here's our web app, okay? What we're going to do is that we're going to move the current, we can just paste it in here, right? We can just paste over this. I'm going to rename maybe my index page. I'm going to rename it so that I don't lose it. It's going to write right over it, right? So I'm going to rename it maybe underscore index, okay? Anything else? And I'm going to paste it right here in our web app. Paste. Are you sure? Yes. So it's copying. All right, there it is. We have static. We have our brand new index page. And we head over to our Java server. This is our Java server. I'm going to refresh. And there we have it. We have our brand new React application running inside of our Java application, right? We can go to our course editor, right? We can go back. We can go back again. Why is this not listing our courses? Let's see, why is it not listing it? Oops. Refresh, login, yeah, we have that. Registration, we don't have anything there. Course lists, why is this not working? Network. Courses, there they are. Yeah, we had run into this issue earlier. Why was it? Oh, I know. This is supposed to be grid/courses, right? Yeah, the links are wrong, right? The links are wrong. So let's fix that in our React application. In our React application, our hyperlinks are wrong. So here, right, if we go home, oh, it's not running. Let's fix it before we run it. So in our home in our home page, let's create the hyperlinks. Let's fix that. So courses, by default, we'll go to table courses. Okay, and let's run build again. Run build again. Now I'm doing this manually, right? I am copying the content here. I'm copying the content manually and I'm pasting it here manually. So that's very error prone. So ideally, what you normally would do is that you would instead have a script do this, right? That refreshes everything. Okay, let's try this again. Course list. No, still not. Courses. Did it not update? Oh, overwrite all. Yes, overwrite them. Let's try it again. Let's refresh. Course list. Okay. All right. Now it's going to table, right? And now it's working the way it was working before. So there you have it. And once it's been deployed to our Java, we can now deploy it at the terminal. We can say git status. We can git add everything. We can add commit added React app, and we can push and git remote. Okay, let's push to Heroku. Git push Heroku. So this is going to push and update my Java application running on Heroku, but it's going to have now my React application replacing my old index page for the usernames and all. So what I would ask is that in your new home, at least give hyperlinks to your old implementations for the login, registration, user admin. So from the home screen, you should have still hyperlinks to all your old content. So let's do now a Heroku open. Heroku open will open up the application running on Heroku, and there we have it. We have a whiteboard home, course editor, course list, right? With our course list, there we go. Right, we can edit this, right? You say okay. So it's still working. Refresh. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that I need to fix. Yeah. And I'm gonna leave you. It's called selected. It's now. It's called selected. Disregard. Okay. All right. Anything? Yeah. So I think you have enough to get to either have started already on the assignment or get you started. Please use any and all piece of information that I've provided. Notice I've left the grid unimplemented. Right. I focus mostly on the table. but use the Bootstrap implementation of grid of cards, right? So if you go to Bootstrap, Bootstrap, and you look for cards. Okay, in cards, right? You can use these cards, right, to implement the grid representation of the assignment. Okay. All right.
Professor,
Any questions?
are we gonna have class on Monday?
Oh, yeah, I know. Monday is a holiday. No, it's we're closed.
Okay, but the assignment is still due, I assume.
I guess it could be due on Tuesday.
I believe it already
Let's
says
make
it's due on
let's
Tuesday.
make it due on Tuesday.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Professor?
All right. Well, I have office hours at 3. If I don't hear from you, have a great long weekend. Enjoy, and cheers.
Professor? Professor? May I ask you-
Yes.
For the homework, what are the expectations in terms of styling? Do you want us to mimic exactly what we've done in the earlier assignments for some of the pages and wireframes you already designed for them? Or do you just...
So for the styling, it has to at least look as good as what we give you. It doesn't have to look identical to it, but it has to at least look as polished as what we gave you. You're free to maybe change your themes around, and if you feel you have a better implementation, that's fine. If you can defend, if you can defend the your position that yours is prettier, then obviously that's a little bit subjective. But if you can defend the fact that yours is prettier or it's even better, an improvement on what we gave you, then we'll give you the full credit.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a nice weekend.